Greetings and welcome to Productive DeFi. So in this lesson, we are going to continue with the self-sufficiency portion, and this is really going to be the main self-sufficiency portion, which is going to allow you to really understand how to explore and navigate and discover new opportunities within DeFi. This lesson is really going to cover, well, how do you understand and locate and discover all the different DeFi protocols that are out there? As you're going to discover, there's thousands of them, and every day there's more. So let's take a look at how you can learn to explore DeFi on your own. Because how was I able to discover Avalanche Market and locate the opportunity, which is now currently yielding 8.18%? And how was I able to locate this sushi swap? So in this lesson, I want to show you how you can discover other protocols like this and not only be able to discover them, but be able to gauge, is this a good opportunity? Is this something that you should actually use? Now, in the lesson after this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a walkthrough to show you a bunch of other protocols very similar to Sushi Swap or Aave, and a bunch of others that you can use for finding yield opportunities in DeFi. So I'm going to give you specifics in the next lesson, but this lesson is really going to free up your horizons and allow you to discover how you can discover all of these protocols yourself. But in the next lesson, I want to give you some very specific ones so that you are kind of on the right path without having to just navigate around blindly and discover ones on your own. So in the next lesson, I'll have specific protocols that I'll show you so that way you can understand here's a basket of protocols that you can start with and you can kind of know these are good ones to get off the ground using specifically. But in this lesson, I'm going to teach you how you can start being able to discover your own protocols so you're not reliant just on the list I give you, right? Because I don't want to just give you 10 protocols and you don't know how to use anything else and you're really uncertain about how to go and discover these on your own. I want to make sure you can go and locate new ones and you can discover better yield opportunities and ones that are kind of off the beaten path, which sometimes yield higher yields. But you just obviously have to be safe and do your due diligence and research them. So I'm going to close out these protocols that you're already familiar with, and let's jump into this lesson. So in this lesson, I'm going to cover a series of websites that you can use to discover new opportunities on DeFi. And by no means is this the ultimate list of all the websites that you could use to discover new protocols, but it certainly covers a very good range of websites. The first one that I would suggest is CoinMarketCap, which just gives you an idea of what the top blockchains are. And you can see that they're organized by market cap. So the blockchains at the top here in the list are the ones that have the most amount of valuation for the blockchain. And you can generally think of it like the ones at the top of the list are like large cap stocks. And the ones that are farther down the list and, potentially on page 89 or just somewhere like on page 6, anywhere further along here, you'll see that the smart market caps start going down into the millions. And they'll just get lower and lower. Whereas on the front page, we're in the billions for market caps. And you can basically think of bigger market cap blockchains as being blockchains that people most likely trust more because they're obviously holding more money and value and valuation in the blockchain. So a good way to navigate on a macro level is to understand what blockchains are well respected. And then you can consider the protocols within those blockchains. And you can use this as an opportunity to go into any one of these and discover more about it. So we could come into something like Tron and we could see it's on the list. And what I would do when I'm researching things, so I'd probably open a couple. So maybe Solana, Cardano, Tron. And then what you can do is you can locate where they have their official website. And then you can head over to their official website and read up more. And they have learn-in sections on how to learn about what the blockchain does on each one of these individual sites that represents the main blockchain. And every website's different. So you basically just have to figure out how to navigate and read and digest some of the resources on those individual websites. But in order to discover which blockchains are even worth kind of reading up on, you can go ahead and use a list like this, which also, in addition to CoinMarketCap, there is CoinGecko.com and CoinGecko.com. And I'll also include this list of links below this video, so that way you have them in writing. But you can see that CoinGecko has the same layout as CoinMarketCap. So either one of these sites would allow you to basically browse through here and figure out which blockchains are the biggest and thus the most well-trusted and most popular. And then you can kind of come down the list. And as you're getting started, it's good to kind of start with the bigger ones, become familiar with the popular ones, and then slowly over time, as your research takes you further and further down the list, you'll discover deeper and deeper opportunities. But basically a big takeaway that I would want you to have is the further you go down the list, it's pretty much a lot riskier. In the blockchain space, the smaller market caps are much more volatile than anything in the stock market, and have a much less likelihood of being successful and succeeding, especially anything that's on like the last page, stuff that's much further down in the pages, such as like page 40, where the market caps are almost non-existent, only $16,000 or 250,000 tied up in some of these protocols. And these are also self-reported, and you can see that who really knows if that's the true market cap of what the valuation is for this random asset that we discovered when it's self-reported and it's not really verified. Can we really trust the creator of the blockchain to self-report accurately? That's why I believe a big portion of becoming self-sufficient in blockchain is sticking to the larger market cap sizes in the beginning and becoming more familiar with those as a good starting ground, as it'll be a safer opportunity generally. Although nothing in blockchain is necessarily safe, or rather I should put it probably as everything in blockchain can be pretty volatile. The other protocol that I want to show you, one of my favorites, is DeFi Llama. Now, DeFi Llama allows you to basically take a look at the total value locked in any particular blockchain or protocol. And total value locked is basically the amount of funds that people have put into a blockchain or a protocol that they can't easily take out. So they've put this money into the protocol or blockchain and it's pretty much sitting there. And that value is locked up in that protocol or blockchain until those individuals decide to pull the value out. This can be a big indication, right? Because it's basically like putting your money where your mouth is. People will generally put their money where they feel it's safe and where it's offering the best opportunities. And so it can show you where people are basically putting their money into the market. There's a high-level overview here which shows you pretty much which protocols have the top rankings. So you can take a look at these protocols and you can figure out which category they're in as well. So we can see that right now the biggest protocol is this Lido protocol, which is part of the Ethereum network and assists with staking. And so it also shows that the category is liquidity staking. And you can see that it has quite a bit of total value locked up into it. Now, the biggest protocols with the most total value locked are not necessarily always the best opportunities for yield, but they're usually the safer options. So it's kind of this balance of, do you want to go with the safest one, which has the most amount of value in it? Or do you want to branch out deeper and look for better yields in some of the ones that are further down the list? And that's where a risk to reward ratio really comes in and kind of self-analyzing the amount of risk that you want to take personally, which is a really personal decision ultimately. So you can see here that the lending and borrowing protocol that we used before is one of the most popular, and it supports 10 chains. We can also see that there's another one called Just Lend, which appears to be almost the same amount of total value locked as our Aave protocol that we used before, but it only supports one chain right now, which is the Tron chain. So if you're interested in another lending opportunity in addition to Aave, which we took before, and you wanted to use the blockchain Tron, then this would basically be a solution that you could consider. A nice thing about their graphs as well is they show you over time basically how people have locked up their value. So you can kind of see if it's becoming more popular or less popular. And you can also evaluate the trend of if people are locking their funds up in a volatile fashion or a more consistent with consistent growth type strategy where it's consistently putting more and more funds in slowly over time. And this can also give you an idea of, is this growth going to continue, or does it look like it's really choppy and risky and people are just kind of jumping in and out of the protocol as they see fit? So there's a lot of data that you can digest from looking at DeFi Llama and taking a look at the total value lock that's in any one of these protocols. And they also have really nice sections. So in addition to the overview, we can also look at chains directly. And we can figure out on the blockchains, how is the total value locked in every single individual blockchain and the sum of all of the protocols within each individual blockchain totaling up. So this gives a huge idea. So even though Tron is not necessarily the largest market cap opportunity, as we can see here, Tron is number 10. Something like Solana technically has a larger market cap, over 2 times the size of Tron. But what's interesting about the information that DeFi Llama gives us is it shows us that Solana has a lot less total value locked in it than Tron. In other words, people are more willing to hold their funds long-term and hold their funds in Tron and pursue opportunities within it and the protocols inside of it. Whereas it appears that Solana, while Solana might have a larger market cap, it seems like people are not necessarily locking up the value of their funds in Solana as much as they are in Tron. So this kind of paints a different picture than just simply looking at, well, what is the biggest protocol? And in addition to chains, another page that I like is just categories. So that way we can go and take a look at so that way we can go and break down categories. So say you're interested in lending, or you're interested in dexes or bridges, or you were interested in yield. Well, you can go ahead and you can click in yield and you can find out which yield protocols are popular by their total value locked. You can see here it is filtered by total value locked. And this allows you to discover a lot of other opportunities and sites that you could potentially use. So you could browse each one of these and I would just open it up. I would locate the site. I can click view on CoinGecko and also locate their official site, aurora.finance. And now we've located an opportunity. We could open up the app And I usually like to do a little bit of research before just jumping into something blindly. But what you can do is you could maybe have a wallet where you don't store any funds in it, just so you can connect to stuff quickly. And that's easy to do because we can just go ahead and add another account, add account, check stuff out. And then maybe we'll connect our wallet and we'll just go ahead and add check stuff out. So that way our other funds can't be accessed by this protocol while we're browsing around and checking things out before deciding to make a serious decision to put any of our funds into it. And again, and then we'll give it permission. And now we can come into the protocol and we can start looking around and discovering what opportunities exist here. We can start looking at the APRs and the pairs that are being offered. And then if we locate an opportunity here that looks attractive to us, which as you can see, there are some almost yielding up to 80% as well as 70%. So we'd want to research all these pairs and consider how are their valuations going to change over time. Can we trust this gold coin? Is it going to fluctuate wildly? Is it going to affect us in a negative fashion? Is it potentially going to hurt our account by fluctuating too much? So there's a lot of considerations there. So we'll talk more about that in the research section of this course. But this is just a way for you to start exploring these other protocols and discovering what might potentially be offering some decent yields. And before just blindly throwing my money in something that has high yields, I would definitely want to research these protocols a little bit more and determine if they're safe by checking to see if these protocols have ever historically had any security breaches. It's also not a bad idea sometimes if you're using a protocol for the first time to maybe go with a smaller portion of an investment, even though the yields might be attractive and you want to throw 100% in it, and you're really thinking about how much money you can make if you just threw 100% in it. Maybe it's a good idea to start with a smaller portion and just verify that you can get your money in and out of these protocols safely before you go ahead and become more comfortable putting more of your funds into it. So that is just one example, and you could obviously go ahead and check out a bunch of these other protocols over time and start to explore them. Again, I highly recommend having an account that is just a little bit separate from the ones where you actually have funds in it for connecting to a bunch of different protocols. And then just use your account that you actually have funds in for the protocols that you trust after doing your research. And one last thing with DeFi Llama in their category section, they have some really interesting categories such as derivatives. They even have insurance. They have privacy. And you can discover that there's a lot more. So as you can see, there's a lot more involved in DeFi than just lending protocols or liquidity providers. As you can see, though, that lending and being a liquidity provider are basically the most popular ways to generate yield in DeFi. But as you can see, there are a lot of other potential opportunities, such as using yield aggregators that try to find you the best yields. And the nice thing here is that in the description, they'll tell you what every single one of these does. So if you're somebody that wants to be a little bit more hands-off, you could look into yield aggregators that will handle finding the best opportunities in DeFi for you on your behalf instead of having to manually go and locate them. And then as you can see, there's a bunch of other categories which we didn't necessarily look into, but are opportunities for you to explore and discover what else is out there in DeFi. A really interesting one is synthetics, for example, which is a token derivative that mimics the value of another asset. So some of these will try to mimic stocks actually and do synthetics of other assets that are out there in the world, such as gold and other ones. They could obviously be a little bit more risky too, but definitely lots of interesting categories of DeFi to explore. So DeFi Llama is a really nice one that I like to look at in particular and use to analyze total value locked. A couple others are another one you can use that's similar to DeFi Llama is dApp Radar, which allows you to explore dApps, and you can discover these by categories as well, or going by chains. Then there's an interesting site called Token Terminal, which has a research section, which under their terminal section allows you to look at the market in different lights, which allows you to look at the market in a different way. For example, one of the interesting views they have is financial statements, which is interesting because obviously there's no technical financial statements in DeFi. These protocols do not necessarily publish their financial statements, but this website has found a way to aggregate all of the information on the blockchain, which is open and available since blockchains have an open ledger. And you can see that the Aave protocol that we looked at before, they're able to aggregate all of the information and basically tell you the net deposit, active loans involved on the financial statement, and basically tell you the net deposits, active loans, and a lot more information related to the DeFi protocol for the lending and borrowing protocol that we used before, and aggregate this all into what would be considered a traditional financial statement. So a very fascinating way to digest if these protocols are worth using and give you an idea of how successful or risky they could potentially be if you want to analyze any protocol in more depth. So I thought that one is really interesting and can assist you in the research portions of this course. And then we have DEX Tools, which is another one that you can explore and is a nice one for looking at pair explorers and pulling up charts on any particular asset. And they also have a nice board which shows you things like the daily gainers, losers in crypto, as well as hot pairs that have a lot of volume coming into them. So this can be a helpful overview of the market as well on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, coming back to CoinMarketCap, there's also this Fear and Greed Index, which is really useful. So this gives you an idea of how greedy or fearful people are being in the market. Generally, this is thought of as when people are very, very greedy, they've overbought an asset. And when people are very, very fearful, they've oversold an asset. And so, quote unquote, smart investors in blockchain tend to purchase when the fear is very high in the market. And they tend to sell when there's a lot of greed in the market, which is a bit of a contrarian view. And from my personal observation, of course, not financial advice, from what I've seen, it's generally been a good idea to buy. And when there's a lot of greed in the market, I've generally noticed that that is usually the correct time to sell some of your assets. Of course, it's not 100% accurate. And the last asset that I want to show you for becoming self-sufficient is under Blockchain Center. They have one tool that's really nice in particular, which is the Alt Season Index. And you can explore their site for other tools, but this is the one I really want to show you. Altcoin Season Index gives you an idea of whether it's altcoin season or Bitcoin season. Generally, in altcoin season, you make a lot more money with altcoins. And then in Bitcoin season, Bitcoin is the safer asset in the market. So people tend to put most of their money in Bitcoin and it tends to outperform the altcoins. So this can be a useful index in the research portion of this course as well for allowing you to understand if you should be investing heavily in altcoins or Bitcoin mainly. Like anything, tools are just simply helpful indicators. They don't mean that anything is definitively the correct way to trade. You'll ultimately have to do your own research and due diligence to come to a useful decision. All right, so that's it for this lesson. I hope that you found this useful. I know this was a quick overview. These are really sites that are going to allow you to browse around and start discovering things on your own. And don't be too shy and don't hesitate to browse around. Now, in the next lesson, again, I want to take you through some specific protocols because it might be overwhelming for you to start going through all of these different categories and starting to try to figure out, well, which ones should you maybe start with? So in the next lesson, I'm going to give you a basket of specific protocols out of the thousands that are out there to give you a rough starting point that you can think of as maybe saying, maybe I'll start with these 10 protocols that he showed me specifically as a starting point, and then I'll slowly branch out over time and start to explore these on my own. All right, so I'll see you in the next lesson where I'll give you some specific protocols to give you a nice small subset of opportunities that you can start to orient yourself and navigate DeFi in.